For millennia, the Zephyrians have ruled the galaxy through their gift of telepathy, reading thoughts as easily as breathing. No species has ever hidden anything from them. No mind has ever been closed to their gentle touch. They are the peacekeepers, the mediators, the wise ones who prevent wars before they begin. But humanity is different. When Commander Sarah Chun stands before the Galactic Council, accused of war crimes that could doom her entire species, the Zephyrian Inquisitor Veltar prepares for what should be a routine mental scan. After all, human minds are considered simple, primitive things, easy to read and easier to judge. What Veltar discovers in the depths of Commander Chen's consciousness will shatter everything the galaxy thought it knew about the newest members of their cosmic community. Some minds, it turns out, contain horrors that even telepaths dare not witness. Some thoughts are too dangerous to think, too terrible to touch. And some species survive not despite their darkness, but because of it. Welcome to humanity's first contact with a galaxy that thought it understood evil, until it met the species that had to learn to live with it. The crystalline chamber of the Galactic Council hummed with the soft harmonics of 1,000 different species breathing in unison. Commander Sarah Chun stood in the center of the vast space, her hands clasped behind her back in perfect military posture. The weight of humanity's future pressed down on her shoulders like a lead blanket, but her face remained calm, professional. She had trained for this moment for 3 years, ever since the Kepler incident had brought her species to the attention of the galaxy's governing body. Around her, representatives from dozens of worlds watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright disgust. The Crystalline Collective's ambassadors sparkled with nervous energy, their silicon-based form refracting the chamber's ambient light into prismatic patterns. The hive mind of Serenity's speaker clicked and chittered in what Sarah's translator identified as whispered gossip. Most unsettling of all were the Zephyrians, whose pale blue forms seemed to glow with an inner light as they observed her with their large, dark eyes. Commander Chun of the Terran Defense Force, announced Prime Arbitrator Kolthai, his voice booming through the chamber despite his diminutive stature. The amphibian-like being's throat sac expanded as he spoke, a sign Sarah had learned indicated formal proceedings. You stand accused of 17 counts of excessive force, 43 counts of civilian endangerment, and 1 count of xenocide in the 4th degree. How do you answer these charges? Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The charges were based on incomplete information, data that had been filtered through the Zephyrians' own cultural lens of pacifism. They didn't understand what humanity had faced in the Kepler system. They couldn't comprehend the choice she had been forced to make. I request the right of mental verification, she said clearly, her voice carrying across the chamber without amplification. Let your telepath see the truth of what happened. A murmur rippled through the assembled delegates. Mental verification was typically reserved for the most serious of charges, and many species considered it an invasion of privacy. But the Zephyrians had made it clear that without it, humanity would face immediate expulsion from the galactic community and potential quarantine of their entire system. Inquisitor Veltar rose from his position among the Zephyrian delegation. He was tall even for his species, standing nearly 8 feet in height, with the characteristic willowy build of his people. His skin held the faint luminescence that marked him as one of the strongest telepaths of his generation, and his eyes seemed to hold depths of wisdom accumulated over his 4-century lifespan. I accept the responsibility of verification, Veltar announced, his mental voice touching every mind in the chamber simultaneously. The sensation was like a gentle breeze brushing against consciousness itself. Commander Chun, please understand that this process may be uncomfortable for your species. Human minds are known to resist telepathic contact. Sarah nodded curtly. She had been briefed extensively on what to expect. The resistance he mentioned was one of humanity's more infamous traits in galactic society. While most species had some degree of natural telepathic ability, humans seemed almost deliberately designed to block mental intrusion. It had taken months of training with Zephyrian volunteers just to allow the most basic surface contact. I understand the risks, Inquisitor, Sarah replied. I'm prepared. Veltar approached slowly, his movements fluid and precise. The other Zephyrians in the chamber began to hum softly, a harmonic that helped focus telepathic energy. As he drew closer, Sarah could feel the faint pressure of his mental presence, like a whisper at the edge of hearing. "Please relax your mental defenses," Veltar instructed, placing his long, delicate fingers against Sarah's temples. "I will be as gentle as possible." Sarah closed her eyes and tried to follow the meditation techniques she had learned. The sensation was immediately strange, as if someone were trying to pour water into a locked container. Her human mind naturally resisted the intrusion, building barriers of logic and skepticism against the alien presence. Veltar pressed deeper, his mental touch growing stronger. Around the chamber, the other delegates watched in fascination. Most species found mental verification to be routine, even pleasant. The Zephyrians were known throughout the galaxy for their gentle touch, their ability to browse memories without causing trauma or damage. Sarah felt the first layers of her consciousness peel back, like an onion being carefully dissected. Veltar's presence moved through her recent memories with professional efficiency. The journey to this world, the weeks of preparation, the formal charges being read. He was looking for the Kepler incident, the event that had brought humanity to this moment of judgment. "Remarkable," Veltar murmured, his voice carrying both spoken words and mental impressions. "Your memories are so vivid, so detailed. I can see why your species produces such effective military commanders." He pushed deeper, past the formal military training and the careful diplomatic preparation. Sarah felt a momentary discomfort as he touched memories of her childhood, her family, her first day at the academy. But she held steady, knowing that these surface memories were not what the council needed to see. Then, Veltar found the edge of what he was looking for. The Kepler system hung in the darkness of space like a jeweled crown, its 3 inhabited worlds gleaming with the reflected light of their orange star. Sarah's fleet had arrived to find something that their intelligence reports had never prepared them for. The Devourers had already consumed the outer planets, leaving behind only hollow shells of rock and metal. Veltar's mental touch faltered for a moment as he encountered Sarah's memory of first seeing the creatures. They defied easy description, existing partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that human science barely understood. Each one was the size of a small moon, their bodies seeming to shift and flow like liquid shadow given form. "Fascinating," Veltar whispered, his professional interest overriding his discomfort. "These creatures you faced, they were unlike anything in our galactic records." He pressed deeper into the memory, experiencing Sarah's horror as she realized what they were dealing with. The Devourers weren't just consuming the planets themselves, they were feeding on something far more fundamental. The life force, the consciousness, the very souls of the billions of beings they had already killed. Sarah felt Veltar's mental presence recoil slightly as he experienced her first direct communication with the lead Devourer. The creature's mind was vast and alien, filled with an hunger that spanned geological ages. It had offered humanity a choice: join them willingly, become part of their eternal feast, or be consumed against their will like all the others. "Impossible," Veltar breathed, his mental voice carrying undertones of disbelief. "Such entities cannot exist. The universe has laws, safeguards against such absolute evil." But the memory continued, and Veltar found himself experiencing the crucial moment when Sarah had been forced to make her choice. 3 worlds full of civilians, over 12 billion sentient beings, were dying by the hour as the Devourers fed. Her fleet was outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy that seemed immune to conventional weapons. The solution, when it came, was brutally simple. Sarah had discovered that the Devourers were vulnerable to one thing: the death screams of their victims. Not just any death, but the specific psychic resonance created when a sentient being died in absolute terror and despair. It was a frequency that could disrupt their dimensional phasing, making them vulnerable to physical attack. Veltar's mind reeled as he experienced Sarah's terrible realization. To save the 12 billion civilians, she would have to create that resonance artificially. She would have to torture prisoners of war, captured Devourer cultists who had willingly joined the enemy, until their death agonies created the psychic weapon needed to drive back the creatures. "No," Veltar gasped aloud, his mental voice echoing through the chamber. "Surely you found another way." Surely humanity's vaunted ingenuity produced a better solution. But the memory was relentless in its clarity. Sarah had given the order personally, had watched as her soldiers carried out the most morally repugnant action in human military history. 47 captured cultists had died in carefully orchestrated agony, their psychic death screams creating the resonance frequency that had finally driven off the devourers. The plan had worked perfectly. The creatures had fled back to whatever dimensional abyss had spawned them, leaving behind the 3 inhabited worlds mostly intact. 12 billion beings had lived to see another day. But the cost had been Sarah's soul, and the souls of everyone who had participated in the action. Veltar tried to pull back, tried to withdraw from the memory, but found himself caught in its gravitational pull. Sarah's mind was holding him there, forcing him to experience every moment of her decision-making process. He felt the weight of 12 billion lives pressing down on her consciousness, felt the terrible mathematics of sacrifice that had led to her choice. "This cannot be," he whispered, his mental voice growing weaker. "No species makes such choices. No civilization survives with such darkness." But Sarah's memories showed him that he was wrong. Humanity had not just survived such choices, they had been shaped by them. Every human carried within their mind a catalog of historical atrocities, a genetic memory of the terrible things their species had done to ensure its survival. The Holocaust, the atomic bombs, the wars of extinction that had nearly destroyed their world before they reached the stars. And, deeper still, in the bedrock of human consciousness, Veltar found something that made his advanced mind simply stop functioning. He found the place where humans stored their knowledge of evil itself, the part of their psyche that understood how to become monsters when monsters were needed. The chamber erupted in chaos as Veltar screamed, a sound that no Zephyrian had ever made before. His mental cry of anguish touched every telepathic mind in the room, sending several delegates to their knees in sympathetic agony. The harmonic humming of the other Zephyrians shattered into discord as they felt their Inquisitor's terror through their species link. Sarah opened her eyes to find Veltar collapsed on the crystalline floor, his luminescent skin flickering like a dying light. His large eyes were wide with horror, and his mental voice, when it finally returned, was barely a whisper. "What are you?" he gasped, both aloud and telepathically. "What manner of species carries such darkness, and still calls itself civilized?" The chamber fell silent except for the sound of Veltar's ragged breathing. Every delegate stared at Sarah with new expressions, no longer seeing a simple military commander, but something far more complex and terrifying. Sarah looked down at the fallen Inquisitor with something approaching pity. "We're the species that learned to live with monsters," she said quietly. "Because sometimes, to protect the innocent, you have to become the thing you're fighting against." She turned to address the Prime Arbitrator, her voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. "The mental verification is complete. You have seen the truth of what happened at Kepler. Now you must decide. Do you want us as allies, or do you want to face the Devourers alone when they return?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and, for the first time in galactic history, the wise and ancient species of the Council found themselves truly afraid of the newest members of their cosmic community. The medical bay of the Council station hummed with alien technology as Veltar lay unconscious on a bioadaptive healing platform. His fellow Zephyrians surrounded his still form, their luminescent skin pulsing in synchronized patterns that indicated deep concern. Dr. Mayandra, the station's chief medical officer, ran her 4 hands over scanning devices that projected holographic readouts above the Inquisitor's body. "His neural pathways show massive trauma," she announced to the assembled medical team. "I've never seen anything like this. It's as if his mind has been infected somehow." High Arbiter Zalnath, the eldest of the Zephyrian delegation, leaned heavily on his crystalline walking staff. His ancient eyes, clouded with the wisdom of 8 centuries, studied the medical readings with growing alarm. "Explain the nature of this infection, Doctor." Mayandra's tentacles writhed with nervousness as she manipulated the holographic display. The human memories he accessed appear to have created recursive loops in his consciousness. Her experiences are replaying constantly in his mind. But, more than that, they're changing him somehow. His psychic resonance is fluctuating in ways I've never documented. In the main council chamber, The emergency session had devolved into barely controlled chaos. Representatives from dozens of species argued in multiple languages and communication methods, their translators struggling to keep up with the rapid-fire exchanges. The revelation of humanity's actions at Kepler had sent shockwaves through the galactic community. Ambassador Talon of the Pacifist Alliance stood at his delegation's podium, his gas-formed body shifting colors rapidly with agitation. "This is precisely why we opposed humanity's admission to the Council," his synthesized voice declared. "Their capacity for violence exceeds even our worst projections." Violence. Sarah Chun remained standing in the center of the chamber, her posture unchanged despite the chaos around her. "You call saving 12 billion lives violence? You tortured prisoners of war," accused Senator Grix of the Moral Authority Coalition, her insectoid mandibles clicking with outrage. "You deliberately inflicted suffering for tactical advantage. Such actions are forbidden by every civilized society in the galaxy." Sarah's laugh was harsh and bitter. "Civilized society. Do you want to know what civilized society looks like when faced with extinction? It looks exactly like what I did. The only difference between your species and mine is that you've never had to make that choice." Prime Arbitrator Coldeye pounded his ceremonial gavel, the sound echoing through the chamber's acoustic systems. "Order. This session will maintain proper decorum." But the damage was already done. The careful diplomatic balance that had allowed humanity into the galactic community was crumbling in real time. Sarah could see it in their faces, hear it in their voices. Fear was replacing curiosity, and fear would inevitably lead to isolation. "If I may," a new voice cut through the arguing. The speaker was Ambassador Thane of the warrior caste of Krex, a species known for their military prowess and direct approach to conflict. His massive, four-armed form commanded immediate attention as he rose from his seat. "Perhaps we are asking the wrong questions." The chamber gradually fell silent, curious to hear from a species that had remained neutral in the debate so far. The Krex were respected throughout the galaxy as honorable warriors, their opinions on military matters carrying significant weight. "Commander Chun," Thane continued, his deep voice carrying a rumble of barely controlled power, "these devourers you faced. You say they will return. Explain." Sarah nodded, grateful for the opportunity to focus on practical matters rather than moral philosophy. "Our scientists studied the dimensional distortions they left behind. The creatures didn't retreat permanently. They simply moved to a different phase of reality. They're still there, still feeding, still growing stronger. And they're learning from their encounter with us." She gestured to the central holographic display, which shimmered to life, showing tactical projections. "According to our calculations, they'll return within 5 standard galactic years. When they do, they'll be prepared for the resonance weapon we used against them. We'll need new strategies, new weapons, new ways of thinking about warfare itself." The crystalline collective's ambassador, their form refracting nervous patterns of light, spoke in harmonic tones. "Surely the combined fleets of the galaxy can deal with any threat, no matter how dangerous." "Can they?" Sarah's question hung in the air like a challenge. "Your fleets are designed for conflicts between civilized species. You fight with rules, with honor, with the assumption that your enemies share some basic moral framework. The Devourers don't just want to defeat you. They want to consume your very essence. They feed on suffering itself." Ambassador Thane leaned forward, his battle-scarred features intense with interest. "Show us your tactical data. Show us what these creatures are capable of." Sarah interfaced with the chamber's display system, calling up the complete battle records from Kepler. The assembled delegates watched in growing horror as the footage showed the Devourers in action. The creatures moved through space like living shadows, their forms shifting between dimensions in ways that made conventional targeting almost impossible. "Your energy weapons pass through them when they're phased," Sarah explained as the tactical display showed fleet after fleet of conventional warships being systematically destroyed. "Your kinetic projectiles have no effect. They can exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously, attacking from angles that don't exist in normal space." The footage showed the final moments of the Kepler Defense Fleet, humanity's first attempt at conventional warfare against the creatures. Ship after ship simply vanished, their crews consumed before they could even comprehend what was happening to them. 12 billion people, Sarah continued, her voice steady despite the horrific images playing before them. That's how many died in the first 3 days of the invasion. The Devourers don't just kill, they preserve consciousness during the feeding process. Every single person they consumed is still alive inside them, aware, experiencing eternal agony as their life force is slowly digested. Several delegates left the chamber at that revelation. The concept of conscious, eternal suffering was so alien to most galactic species that many simply couldn't process it. Dr. Mayandra's voice cut through the horrified silence as she contacted the chamber from the medical bay. Arbitrator Kolthai, you need to see this immediately. The Inquisitor has awakened, but there's been a change. The medical bay was quieter now, most of the support staff having been dismissed. Veltar sat upright on the healing platform, but his posture was different, more rigid, more alert. His luminescent skin no longer pulsed with the gentle rhythms typical of his species. Instead, it flickered in sharp, erratic patterns. Inquisitor, High Arbiter Zalneth approached cautiously, his mental touch barely grazing the surface of Veltar's consciousness. How do you feel? Veltar turned to look at his elder, and his eyes held depths that hadn't been there before. I understand now, he said, his mental voice carrying undertones of something that might have been madness or might have been revelation. I understand what they are. The humans. No. Veltar stood slowly, his movements more controlled and purposeful than before. The Devourers. I've seen them through human eyes, felt them through human consciousness. They're not just predators, they're antibodies. The medical team exchanged glances of concern. Veltar was speaking, but his words carried implications that defied conventional understanding. Antibodies against what? Dr. Mayandra asked carefully. Veltar's skin flashed with patterns of bioluminescence that hurt to look at directly. Against the universe itself becoming too pure, too perfect, too good. They exist to prevent the galaxy from achieving true peace, true harmony. Because in perfect harmony, consciousness itself begins to stagnate and die. He turned to the assembled Zephyrians, his expression intense with newfound understanding. We've been trying to create a galaxy without conflict, without suffering, without the harsh choices that forge strong minds. But such a galaxy would be vulnerable to threats we can't even imagine. The humans know this instinctively. That's why they carry their darkness with them. Back in the main chamber, the tactical briefing continued. Sarah had called up detailed analyses of devourer feeding patterns, showing how the creatures targeted not just populated worlds, but specifically those with advanced civilizations. They're drawn to psychic energy, she explained. The more evolved a species becomes mentally, the more attractive they are as food sources. Your telepathic abilities, your advanced consciousness, your moral sophistication, all of it makes you prime targets. Ambassador Telenes' gaseous form shimmered with indignation. Are you suggesting that our spiritual advancement makes us weak? I'm suggesting it makes you delicious, Sarah replied bluntly. The Devourers prefer to feed on beings who have never experienced true despair, who have never had to compromise their principles for survival. Pure souls taste better than tainted ones. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The very qualities that the galactic community prized most highly, their moral advancement, their peaceful nature, their telepathic harmony, all of it was exactly what made them vulnerable to the kind of enemy humanity had faced. Veltar's voice suddenly echoed through the chamber's communication system, transmitted from the medical bay. She speaks the truth. I have seen it in her memories. The Devourers are drawn to innocence like predators to prey. And we, in all our wisdom and advancement, have remained innocent of the kind of evil that they represent. The Inquisitor's mental presence filled the chamber, but it was changed, carrying echoes of human darkness that made every telepath present feel uncomfortable. Commander Chen made the choice that preserved not just human lives, but human souls. The alternative would have been to become food for creatures that exist to consume consciousness itself. Prime Arbitrator Kolthai's throat sac inflated with stress. Inquisitor, return to the medical bay immediately. Your mental state is clearly compromised. Compromised? Veltar's laugh was transmitted both orally and telepathically, a sound no Zephyrian had ever made before. No, Arbitrator. For the first time in my 4 centuries of existence, I truly see clearly. We have spent millennia building a civilization based on the assumption that evil is an aberration, a mistake that can be corrected through wisdom and compassion. But some evils exist specifically to prey on that assumption. Sarah nodded grimly. That's exactly what the Devourers are counting on. They're betting that when they return, you'll still be trying to negotiate with them, still believing that there must be some peaceful solution to the conflict. They're counting on your goodness to paralyze you while they feed. The weight of this revelation settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. The galactic community had built their entire civilization on principles of peace, cooperation, and moral advancement. The idea that these very principles might be a fatal weakness in the face of certain threats challenged everything they believed about the nature of good and evil. Ambassador Thane broke the silence with a question that cut to the heart of the matter. What do you propose we do? Sarah's smile was grim and determined. We prepare for war. Real war, not the civilized conflicts you're used to. We build weapons designed to cause maximum suffering to our enemies. We train soldiers to make choices that will haunt them for the rest of their lives. And we accept that sometimes the only way to preserve what is good in the universe is to become something terrible ourselves. The chamber erupted in fresh arguments, but beneath the chaos, a new understanding was beginning to take root. Humanity's darkness wasn't a flaw to be corrected, it was a tool that might be essential for survival. The question now was whether the galactic community could learn to use that tool without losing themselves in the process. 3 months after the catastrophic council session, the Zephyrian homeworld of Luminous had become a place of unprecedented division. The crystalline spires that had housed centuries of peaceful contemplation now echoed with heated debates that would have been unthinkable before Veltar's transformation. The Inquisitor sat in his private chambers, surrounded by holographic displays showing human historical records and military tactical manuals. His aide, a younger Zephyrian named Kessandi, approached with obvious reluctance. The luminescent patterns on her skin flickered with nervous energy as she transmitted her concerns telepathically. Master Veltar, the High Council requests your immediate presence. They're concerned about your studies. Veltar didn't look up from the tactical display showing the Battle of Stalingrad. Tell them I'm learning, he replied, his mental voice carrying undertones that made Kessandi flinch. For the first time in my existence, I'm truly learning about the nature of conflict. But, Master, these human conflicts are ancient history. Surely they have no relevance to our current situation. Now Veltar did look at her, and his eyes held depths of understanding that seemed almost human in their complexity. Every relevance, young one. Look at this battle. He gestured to the hologram. 2 armies locked in urban combat for months, each side willing to sacrifice hundreds of thousands of lives for control of a single city. The humans called it hell on earth. Kessandi studied the display with growing discomfort. It seems pointless. Such waste of life for such limited strategic value. That's exactly what I thought initially, Veltar agreed. But look deeper. Study the psychological profiles of the combatants. They weren't fighting for territory, they were fighting for the right to define reality itself. The victor would determine whether compassion or brutality shaped the future of their species. He manipulated the display, showing the aftermath of the battle. The humans who won this conflict went on to build one of the most peaceful eras in their planet's history. They earned their right to gentleness through their willingness to be savage when savagery was required. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, Commander Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the newly commissioned UES Prometheus, humanity's first vessel designed specifically for interdimensional warfare. The ship represented everything the galactic community found disturbing about human military philosophy. It was designed not just to destroy enemies, but to make them suffer in the process. Resonance cannon charging to full power, reported Lieutenant Torres from the weapons station. Psychic amplification matrix showing optimal frequencies for Class 7-dimensional entities. Sarah nodded, watching the test asteroid through the main view screen. The rock was seeded with captured devourer tissue, allowing them to test their new weapons systems without risking actual contact with the creatures. Fire when ready. The weapon that discharged was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of conventional energy or kinetic projectiles, the resonance cannon fired concentrated waves of psychic agony. The recorded death screams of willing volunteers who had sacrificed themselves to create the ultimate anti-devourer weapon. The asteroid didn't simply explode. It seemed to scream as the devourer tissue within it was subjected to psychic frequencies specifically designed to cause maximum suffering. The creature's dimensional phasing ability completely failed when exposed to such concentrated negative psychic energy. Direct hit, Torres reported, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. The biosamples are showing complete cellular breakdown. Whatever interdimensional connection they had has been severed. Sarah stared at the dissipating remains of the asteroid, feeling the weight of what they had created. The resonance cannon was effective, but it represented a level of deliberate cruelty that made many of her crew uncomfortable. It was a weapon designed to torture enemies to death, and everyone involved in its creation carried a piece of that moral burden. Back on Luminous, the Zephyrian High Council had convened an emergency session to address Veltar's increasingly erratic behavior. The ancient chamber, normally a place of serene telepathic harmony, now buzzed with anxiety and conflicting mental voices. He's studying human military tactics obsessively, reported Council member Thelvorn. His living quarters have been converted into what can only be described as a war room. He's analyzing conflicts dating back millennia, studying the psychological profiles of human warriors and commanders. High Arbiter Zalneth raised one aged hand for silence. Has his telepathic ability been compromised? No, if anything it's stronger than ever, admitted Dr. Mayandra. But it's changed. When he performs mind links now, the subjects report experiencing human-like thought patterns. He's somehow integrated human psychological structures into his own consciousness. The implications were staggering. The Zephyrians had spent centuries perfecting their telepathic abilities, creating a mental network that allowed for perfect communication and understanding. The idea that one of their number had been fundamentally altered by contact with an alien mind challenged everything they understood about their own nature. Bring him in, Zalneth decided. We need to understand what has happened to him. When Veltar entered the council chamber, his fellow Zephyrians immediately noticed the change in his mental presence. Instead of the gentle, flowing thoughts typical of their species, his consciousness moved in sharp, tactical patterns that felt almost predatory. Veltar, Zalneth addressed him formally. The council is concerned about your recent behavior. You've been studying human warfare with an intensity that many find disturbing. Veltar's skin flickered with patterns of bioluminescence that seemed to pulse in rhythm with some internal conflict. I've been preparing for the war that's coming, he replied simply. The war that all of you refuse to acknowledge. We've analyzed the human data. Council member Ithalan interjected. Our combined fleets should be sufficient to handle any threat, even these devourers. Your fleets, Veltar's laugh carried distinctly human overtones of dark amusement, are designed to fight civilized enemies. They're built around the assumption that your opponents share some basic moral framework, some concept of honor or restraint. The devourers have no such limitations. He gestured, and a holographic display materialized above the council chamber, showing tactical projections of the approaching threat. I've been inside Commander Chin's memories. I've felt what it's like to face an enemy that exists solely to inflict suffering. Our conventional military doctrine is worse than useless against such creatures. It's actively counterproductive. The display showed simulation after simulation of galactic fleet engagements with the Devourers, each one ending in catastrophic defeat. The creature's ability to phase between dimensions made them nearly impossible to hit with conventional weapons, while their psychic attacks could disable entire crews simultaneously. What do you propose? Zalneth asked, though his mental tone suggested he already feared the answer. We need to become more human, Veltar replied bluntly. We need to learn to think like predators, to embrace the darkness that exists in every sentient species. The humans have spent their entire evolutionary history learning to be monsters when monsters were required. We need that knowledge. The council chamber fell silent except for the soft harmonics of shocked Zephyrian minds trying to process this suggestion. The idea of deliberately cultivating violent instincts was antithetical to everything their civilization stood for. That's impossible, Ithalan protested. Our entire social structure is based on telepathic empathy. We couldn't harm another sentient being without experiencing their pain directly. Exactly. Veltar's skin pulsed with intense patterns. That's why we need to learn from the humans. They've developed psychological mechanisms for compartmentalizing necessary violence, for carrying out actions that their conscience would normally prevent. He manipulated the display again, showing psychological profiles of human soldiers throughout their history. Look at their warriors. They don't suppress empathy, they redirect it. They transform their capacity for feeling into a weapon against those who threaten innocence. The concept was revolutionary and terrifying in equal measure. The Zephyrians had always believed that their telepathic empathy made them superior to species that relied on violence. The idea that this same empathy might be a fatal weakness required a complete reevaluation of their worldview. Light years away, in a classified facility hidden in the asteroid belt of the Terran system, other members of the galactic community were learning harsh lessons about the nature of human military thinking. Representatives from a dozen species sat in uncomfortable silence as General Harrison, one of humanity's most experienced military commanders, conducted a briefing on asymmetric warfare. The key to understanding human military doctrine, Harrison explained to his alien audience, is accepting that sometimes the only way to save lives is to make your enemies afraid to fight you. Ambassador Kellen of the Pacifist Alliance shifted his gaseous form uncomfortably. General, surely you're not advocating terrorism.